The soft clink of silverware against fine china filled the air at Le Ciel, one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants. Lily tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear as she balanced 3 plates of perfectly arranged food along her arm. 6 months at this job, and her hands still trembled slightly when serving the wealthy guests who barely looked her way. "Table 12 needs more water," whispered May, another waitress rushing past with an empty tray. Lily nodded, delivering the plates to an elderly couple who at least offered a smile. Unlike most patrons, the restaurant catered to New York's elite, Wall Street executives, fashion icons, and tech giants who could afford to drop several $100s on dinner without blinking. Tonight was especially tense. Richard Harrington had arrived without warning. The 50-something tech billionaire owned half the startups in the city and had a reputation for being brutally demanding. The staff whispered about his visits to other restaurants, how he'd gotten 3 chefs fired last year alone for meals that weren't inspired enough. "He's at table 7, the manager hissed as Lily passed by. "Don't mess this up." Lily's stomach tightened. Table 7 was in her section. She took a deep breath and approached with a fresh water pitcher, taking in the scene. Richard sat alone, scrolling through his phone with a bored expression, his tailored suit probably worth more than what she made in 3 months. A half-eaten plate of seared scallops sat neglected beside a glass of expensive wine. "Would you like more water, sir?" Lily asked quietly. Richard didn't look up from his phone. "If I wanted more water, I would have asked for it." Lily felt her cheeks burn. She should have walked away then, but restaurant policy was clear. Always offer more water. "Of course. I apologize for the interruption." As she turned to leave, a businessman at the next table suddenly pushed his chair back, bumping Lily's arm. The water pitcher tilted, sending a small wave of ice water directly onto Richard's lap and sleeve. The restaurant seemed to freeze. The businessman muttered an apology and quickly retreated. Lily stood paralyzed, pitcher still in hand, as Richard slowly looked up from his now-soaked pants and sleeve. I'm so sorry," Lily stammered, frantically grabbing napkins from a nearby service station. "Please let me help." "Don't touch me," Richard said, his voice calm but cold as he stood. "Where's the manager?" Within seconds, the restaurant manager appeared, profusely apologizing. "Mr. Harrington, please accept our deepest apologies. Your meal is completely on the house, of course, and will cover any cleaning costs for your suit." Lily felt sick. This job paid her rent and helped support her grandmother's medical bills. She couldn't afford to lose it. "It was an accident," she said quietly. "The gentleman at the next table bumped into me." Richard's eyes narrowed as he examined her. His gaze dropped to her hands as she nervously twisted a napkin. He suddenly reached out and grabbed her wrist, turning her hand palm up. "Calluses," he said, studying her fingertips. "Unusual for a waitress." Lily pulled her hand back. Those calluses were remnants of another life, one she'd left behind years ago. The manager looked confused. "Mr. Harrington will assign you another server immediately." "No," Richard interrupted, still staring at Lily. "I'm curious now." He gestured toward the baby grand piano that sat in the corner of the restaurant's lounge area. "You play?" The question caught Lily off guard. "I used to." A strange smile appeared on Richard's face. "Well, now you have a choice. You can either play something for me right now, or you can clean out your locker." The manager sputtered. "Mr. Harrington, that's not necessary." "It's my suit that's ruined," Richard cut in. "And I'm still a major investor in this establishment, aren't I, David?" The manager's face paled. "Yes, of course, but then I get to decide." Richard turned back to Lily. "So what will it be?" "Play or leave." Lily felt a flutter of panic. It had been years since she'd touched a piano. Not since the accident. Not since everything fell apart. "This is ridiculous," she said, finding a moment of courage. "It was an accident," Richard shrugged. "Life is full of difficult choices. Make yours." Other diners were watching now. Lily could feel their eyes on her, some curious, others embarrassed by the scene. May gave her a sympathetic look from across the room. "Fine," Lily said finally. "I'll play." She walked toward the piano, legs feeling like jelly. The shiny black instrument sat in the warm glow of the lounge lighting, lid propped open, waiting. As a teenager, Lily had been on track to attend Juilliard. Piano had been her life, her future. Then came the car crash that took her parents and left her with a grandmother to care for and mountains of debt. She sat down slowly on the bench, aware that conversations had hushed around her. Richard had followed, taking a seat at the small table nearest the piano. He watched her with the detached interest of someone observing an experiment. Lily's fingers hovered over the keys. What should she play? Her mind raced through pieces she once knew by heart. Would her fingers even remember? She began with the simplest thing she could think of, a basic Chopin prelude. Her fingers felt stiff, uncertain. A wrong note made her wince. But slowly muscle memory began to return. The piece was short, and when she finished she looked up to find Richard watching her with an unreadable expression. "That was adequate," he said, "but hardly worth the price of the dry cleaning. Play something else." Lily felt a flash of anger. "I haven't played in years, and whose fault is that?" Richard took a sip of his fresh wine. "You clearly had training." "Good training." "What happened?" "Life happened," she replied shortly, turning back to the keys. This time she chose a Mozart sonata she'd once loved. Her fingers stumbled less, finding their old pathways. As she played, memories flooded back. Hours of practice, competitions, her mother's proud smile. The last notes hung in the air, and she realized several diners had turned to listen. Richard leaned forward. "Better. You're rusty, but there's something there." He studied her with new interest. "What's your name?" "Lily," she answered, unsure why she told him. "Well, Lily," he said, "I've decided you're going to play here every night I dine here. Consider it payment for my suit." "What?" "I can't." "You can and you will," he cut her off. "Unless you'd prefer unemployment?" "I'm sure David would agree this is a fair compromise." The manager, hovering nearby, nodded quickly. "Of course, Mr. Harrington. We can arrange for Lily to provide musical entertainment during your meals." Lily felt trapped. "For how long?" "Until I decide you've paid your debt," Richard said with a shrug. "I come here twice a week. Consider Tuesdays and Fridays your performance nights from now on." He stood, dropping several $100 bills on the table, though he'd been told the meal was free. "Start practicing," he said. "Next time I expect something impressive." As he walked away, Lily remained at the piano, her hands trembling slightly. What had just happened? The restaurant slowly returned to its normal hum of conversation, but Lily felt as though her world had shifted. Later that night, as she hung up her apron, May approached her. "Are you okay?" "That was intense." Lily shook her head. "I don't know what just happened. That man basically owns this place, and now he owns my Tuesday and Friday nights too." "He's a jerk," May said. "But rumor has it he's connected to everyone in the music world. His company sponsors half the arts programs in the city." Lily hadn't known that. She thought of the dust-covered sheet music in her tiny apartment, untouched for years. Could she even play well enough to satisfy someone like Richard? As she rode the subway home, her fingers tapped unconscious patterns on her knees, muscle memory awakening after a long sleep. The thought of playing again terrified her. Music had been too painful after losing everything. Yet something else stirred beneath the fear, a tiny spark she thought had died years ago. Her grandmother's words came back to her. "Sometimes the thing we run from is the very thing we need most." Lily arrived at her small apartment and opened the closet where she'd hidden her past. Behind winter coats and old shoes sat a stack of yellowed sheet music. She pulled it out, dust dancing in the dim light. She had 2 days until Friday, 2 days to remember who she used to be. Friday arrived faster than Lily expected. She had spent every spare moment with her fingers dancing across the chipped keys of the old upright piano in her building's community room. The instrument was badly out of tune, but it was all she had. Her fingers ached in a way they hadn't for years. The familiar pain brought back memories. Her childhood teacher scolding her for playing too many hours without breaks. Her mother gently applying ointment to her inflamed fingertips before competitions. "You need to rest those hands," her grandmother said that morning, placing a cup of tea beside Lily as she reviewed sheet music at their tiny kitchen table. "You've been pushing too hard." "I don't have a choice, Nai," Lily replied, flexing her stiff fingers. "If I don't impress him tonight, I could lose my job." Her grandmother sat down slowly, arthritis making her movements careful and deliberate. At 78, she still carried herself with dignity, despite the pain that constantly shadowed her. "This billionaire man," she said thoughtfully. "Perhaps he saw something in you that you've forgotten." "He saw someone he could push around," Lily muttered, but without real conviction. Truth was, playing again had awakened something she'd been suppressing for 5 years. Even on that awful out-of-tune piano, music had begun flowing through her again, like water finding its way through cracks in a dam. When Lily arrived at Le Ciel that evening, the manager immediately pulled her aside. "Mr. Harrington called earlier," he said, straightening his tie nervously. "He's bringing important guests tonight." "Very important. He expects you to be ready." Lily's stomach tightened. "I'll need time to warm up before he arrives." "Of course." The manager nodded quickly. "You can start your shift an hour later. Just make sure you're impressive." The baby grand piano had been moved to a more central position in the restaurant, polished to a mirror shine. Someone had placed fresh flowers beside it. Lily ran her fingers lightly over the keys. This instrument was perfectly tuned, responsive in a way her practice piano wasn't. She sat down and began gentle scales to warm up, feeling the eyes of early diners on her back. By 7 o'clock, the restaurant was filled with the usual Friday crowd of wealthy patrons. Lily kept glancing at the door, her anxiety growing with each passing minute. At exactly 7:30, Richard Harrington walked in, accompanied by 4 people in expensive business attire. The maitre d' led them to the best table in the house. Richard didn't acknowledge Lily, but she felt his awareness of her presence. She continued playing softly, Debussy's Clair de Lune, while they ordered drinks and appetizers. Only when they had been served their main course did Richard finally look her way, raising his glass slightly in a signal. Lily took a deep breath and began the piece she had been practicing, Beethoven's Pathétique Sonata. It was ambitious, perhaps too ambitious after years away from serious playing, but she wanted to show what she could do. The first movement started well. Her fingers remembered more than she expected, muscle memory taking over where conscious thought faltered. But halfway through the difficult allegro section, her left hand cramped painfully. A wrong note rang out, then another. Lily paused, flexed her fingers, and continued, but the damage was done. Her concentration broke, and the rest of the movement felt mechanical and stiff. When she finished, polite applause rippled through the restaurant. Richard's table was silent. He watched her with that same calculating expression, then turned back to his guests without comment. Lily's face burned with embarrassment. She moved to simpler pieces for the next hour, trying to regain her confidence. During a short break, May brought her a glass of water. "He's the worst," May whispered. "Don't let him get to you." "I messed up," Lily said, sipping the water. "I'm so out of practice." "Well, his friends seem impressed anyway. I heard one asking about you." Lily glanced toward Richard's table. His guests were engaged in animated conversation, but Richard himself was watching her, his expression unreadable. At 9 o'clock, Lily stood to take a short break. As she walked past Richard's table, he reached out and caught her arm. "A word," he said, nodding toward a quiet corner. Lily followed reluctantly, acutely aware of her waitress uniform and his $1,000 suit. "That was disappointing," Richard said without preamble. "I told you." "I haven't played in years," Lily replied, trying to keep the defensiveness from her voice. "And yet you chose one of the most technically challenging sonatas in the repertoire." He raised an eyebrow. "Either very brave or very foolish." Lily said nothing. "My guests are from the Shanghai Symphony Orchestra," Richard continued. "They're in New York for a limited engagement. Chen Wei, their artistic director, asked about you." Lily's heart skipped. The Shanghai Symphony was world-renowned. "What did you tell him?" "That you're a waitress who spilled water on my suit." Richard's mouth quirked slightly.
"And that you used to be quite good." "Used to be," Lily repeated quietly. "Yes." "What happened?"
"You clearly had training." Lily hesitated. She never discussed her past with people at work. But something in Richard's direct gaze made her answer. "Car accident. My parents died. I had medical bills, funeral expenses, and my grandmother to support. Music school became impossible." Richard's expression didn't change. "So you gave up?" Anger flashed through Lily. "I made a choice. The only choice I could make." "There are always more choices than we think," Richard replied. "Your technique is rusty, but your musicality is still there. It's wasted carrying plates." Before Lily could respond, one of his guests approached, an elegant Chinese woman in her 60s. Chen Wei," Richard said smoothly. "This is Lily, our pianist for the evening." The woman smiled warmly at Lily. You play with feeling, she said in accented English. But your hands are fighting with your heart. Lily bowed slightly, recognizing the woman's stature in the music world. Thank you for your kindness. I'm very out of practice. Practice is just time, Chen Wei said with a dismissive wave. The soul of music cannot be practiced. It is there or it is not. She turned to Richard. You said she was a student once? Headed for Juilliard, I believe, Richard answered, looking at Lily for confirmation. Lily nodded, surprised he had somehow learned this detail. Interesting. Chen Wei studied Lily thoughtfully. Perhaps we talk later? After they returned to the table, Lily went back to the piano in a daze. The artistic director of the Shanghai Symphony had just spoken to her like a fellow musician, not a waitress who had spilled water on someone. For the next hour, Lily played with renewed focus. She chose pieces well within her technical abilities but with emotional depth. Chopin nocturnes, Bach preludes, even some Satie. She stopped thinking about Richard or his guests and simply played, letting the music flow through her fingers. At 11, as the restaurant began to empty, Richard's party finally prepared to leave. Chen Wei approached the piano again, handing Lily a business card. We have master classes while in New York, she said. Come on Sunday if you wish. No charge. Lily took the card with trembling fingers. Thank you, she whispered. I will. Richard watched this exchange from a distance. As his party moved toward the door, he lingered behind. You play better when you forget I'm listening, he observed. Lily closed the piano lid gently. I play better when I'm playing for myself, not to save my job. Something like approval flickered in his eyes. Sunday after the master class. Come to this address. He handed her a card with an address on Central Park West. I'm having a small gathering. You'll play there. I have to work, Lily said automatically. No, you don't. I've already arranged it with David. Richard turned to leave, then paused. Practice the Chopin Ballad No. 1. That's what you'll play on Sunday. Lily stared at the card. That's one of the most difficult pieces in the piano repertoire. Yes, Richard said simply. It is. After he left, Lily sat at the empty piano, her mind racing. The Chopin Ballade was far beyond her current abilities, a piece that had challenged her even at her peak. What game was Richard playing? Setting her up to fail, or pushing her towards something she couldn't see? That night Lily couldn't sleep. She lay awake, her fingers moving in silent patterns against the bedsheet, playing invisible notes. For the first time in years, she felt truly alive, terrified, angry, and strangely exhilarated all at once. At dawn, she made a decision. She got up, dressed quietly, and headed to the community room. The old piano waited in the corner, keys yellowed with age. All right, she whispered, opening the sheet music she'd dug out the night before. Let's see what's still in there. As the first golden rays of morning light filled the room, Lily began to play. Sunday morning arrived with gray skies and gentle rain. Lily stood outside Lincoln Center, clutching Chen Wei's business card, her worn backpack holding carefully selected sheet music. She hesitated at the entrance, feeling out of place among the well-dressed music students streaming through the doors. Just go in, she whispered to herself. The worst they can do is turn you away. The security guard barely glanced at Chen Wei's card before directing her to a practice room on the 3rd floor. Lily's heart pounded as she climbed the stairs, memories washing over her, auditions, student recitals, dreams of someday belonging in this world. The practice room was filled with about 20 pianists, most appearing to be students from prestigious music schools. They sat in a semicircle around a grand piano, where Chen Wei was demonstrating a passage from a Rachmaninoff concerto. Her fingers moved with effortless precision, making the complex sequence look simple. Lily slipped into an empty chair at the back. A young man with thick glasses looked up briefly, then returned his attention to Chen Wei. No one else seemed to notice her arrival. For the next 2 hours, Lily watched in awe as Chen Wei worked with the students one by one. Her teaching style was direct but kind, focusing on musicality rather than just technique. Technical perfection without emotion is just showing off, Chen Wei told a student who had played a flawless but soulless Liszt etude. You must decide what you want to say with the music. Then the technique serves the message. When the session ended, most students gathered around Chen Wei with questions. Lily remained in her seat, unsure if she belonged in that eager circle. She was preparing to leave quietly when Chen Wei looked up and beckoned to her. "Lily, yes? You play for us?" The students turned, curious eyes examining her, the unfamiliar face, the non-designer clothes, the worn backpack. Lily felt her cheeks warm. I didn't prepare anything for today. I came to learn," Chen Wei smiled. "Sometimes teaching is in playing, sometimes in listening. Next time you play." She wrote something on a small notepad and handed it to Lily. "Tuesday, come again. Bring the piece you are working on." Lily looked at the note. "Details for another master class." "Thank you," she said, tucking it carefully into her bag. "I will." As the room cleared, Chen Wei approached her. "Richard Harrington says you have great potential." Lily couldn't hide her surprise. "He said that?" "He told me I was disappointing," Chen Wei laughed. "Richard never praises directly, he pushes. Always pushes." She studied Lily with kind but penetrating eyes. "You come to his gathering tonight?" "Yes," Lily admitted. "Though I don't understand why he invited me. He told me to prepare the Chopin Ballade No. 1, which is—" "Very difficult piece," Chen Wei nodded. "Too difficult for someone who has not played seriously for years." "Richard knows this, then why ask for it?" Chen Wei smiled mysteriously. "Perhaps he tests not your fingers, but your spirit." She patted Lily's arm. "I will see you tonight. Do not worry too much about playing perfectly." Hours later, Lily stood before a towering pre-war building on Central Park West, rain still falling steadily. The doorman examined her with barely concealed skepticism, before reluctantly calling up to confirm she was expected. In the elevator, Lily straightened her simple black dress, the nicest thing she owned, and wished she'd had money for a proper concert outfit. Richard's apartment occupied the entire top floor. A uniformed housekeeper opened the door, taking Lily's wet coat with a polite smile. Classical music drifted from somewhere inside, along with the murmur of conversation. The apartment was stunning. High ceilings, museum-quality art, and floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing Central Park spreading out below like a dark green carpet. About 30 people in evening wear stood in small groups, holding champagne flutes and engaging in animated conversation. Lily recognized Chen Wei speaking with a small group near a Steinway grand piano positioned prominently in the corner of the main room. The piano's lid was raised, sheet music already placed on the stand, waiting for her. "Ah, you made it." Lily turned to find Richard approaching, looking different in casual but obviously expensive attire. Dark jeans and a simple black sweater that probably cost more than her monthly rent. "I wasn't sure I should come," Lily admitted, "yet here you are." Richard handed her a glass of water, not champagne. "You'll need clear focus for Chopin." "About that," Lily began, "I've practiced all I could. But my guests include the director of the Manhattan School of Music, 2 symphony conductors, and several potential donors for a scholarship program I'm establishing," Richard interrupted. "They're here to evaluate talent, not perfection." Before Lily could process this information, Richard was leading her toward the piano. Conversations hushed as they approached. Chen Wei gave her an encouraging nod. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard announced, "Lily will play for us now." Heart hammering, Lily took her seat at the piano. The Steinway was magnificent, far better than any instrument she'd ever played. She placed her hands on the keys, feeling their cool, responsive weight. The room waited in expectant silence. Lily glanced at the music, Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor, Opus 23. Even at Juilliard, this piece had been considered a major challenge. After 5 years away from serious playing, it was nearly impossible. She began the opening bars, the gentle introduction deceptively simple. But as the piece progressed into its more demanding sections, her limitations became obvious. Her fingers stumbled over the complex runs, and the emotional landscape of the piece remained partially hidden behind her technical struggles. Halfway through, during a particularly difficult passage, Lily faltered badly. She stopped, her face burning with embarrassment. The room remained silent, neither encouraging nor condemning. She looked up to find Richard watching her intently, not with disappointment or satisfaction, but with curiosity, as if waiting to see what she would do next. In that moment, something shifted inside Lily. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and instead of continuing with the ballade, She began playing something else, a Chinese folk song her grandmother had taught her as a child. The simple, haunting melody filled the room, her fingers finding the notes without effort. She added her own improvisations, weaving in classical techniques with the traditional tune. When she finished, she opened her eyes to find the room completely still. Then Chen Wei began to applaud and others joined in. Richard's expression remained unreadable as he approached the piano. "That wasn't Chopin," he said quietly. "No," Lily agreed. "It was me." A thin smile appeared on his face. "Interesting choice." "The only honest one," Lily replied. "I can't play the ballad yet. Maybe someday, but not today. I thought honesty would be better than pretending." Richard studied her for a long moment. "Come with me," he finally said, gesturing toward a hallway leading away from the main room. Lily followed him to a home office with walls lined with books. Richard closed the door, muffling the party sounds. "Do you know why I asked you to play an impossible piece?" he asked, leaning against his desk. "To humiliate me?" Lily suggested. Richard shook his head. "To see what you would do when faced with the impossible. Most people would either give up entirely or plow through, pretending adequacy. You found a third way." He walked to a window overlooking the park. "I'm establishing a foundation to help talented musicians who've fallen through the cracks. People with potential who've been derailed by circumstances." Lily stared at him. "And you're telling me this because—" "I have a proposition," Richard turned back to her. "A challenge, really. In 1 month there's a charity gala at the Metropolitan Opera House. Many of my potential donors will attend. What does that have to do with me? I want you to perform there," Richard said simply. "One piece, original composition preferred. If you can silence the room, truly command every person's attention, I'll fund your return to music school and your grandmother's medical care." Lily felt dizzy. "And if I fail? Then you become my private pianist for a year, playing at all my events, dinner parties, gatherings. Paid, of course, but your time would be mine." "Why would you make that offer to someone who just failed at playing Chopin?" Richard's expression softened slightly. "Because you didn't actually fail. You refused to fail on someone else's terms. You played your own music instead." He walked to a shelf and selected a book, a biography of a famous pianist. "Success isn't about playing the notes someone else wrote perfectly. It's about finding your own voice." Lily took the book hesitantly. "So this whole thing, making me play at the restaurant, inviting me here tonight, was all a test?" "Call it talent scouting," Richard replied. "Now do we have a deal?" Lily thought about her grandmother's mounting medical bills, about the dusty dreams she'd packed away years ago. She thought about the restaurants where she'd served countless meals while hiding who she really was. 1 month isn't much time to compose and perfect an original piece, she said. "That's part of the challenge," Richard agreed. "Your answer?" Lily extended her hand. "Deal." As they returned to the party, Lily noticed Chen Wei watching them with a knowing smile. "He told you his proposal?" the older woman asked as Richard rejoined another group. "Yes," Lily said. "Did you know about this?" Chen Wei nodded. "Richard approached me last week after you played at the restaurant. He said he'd found a diamond buried in the dirt." "A diamond?" Lily repeated, skeptical. "His words, not mine." Chen Wei smiled. "But perhaps not wrong. Now about this competition piece, you will need guidance. Come to my hotel tomorrow morning. We begin work." As Lily left the apartment building later that night, the rain had stopped and stars were visible between breaks in the clouds. For the first time in years, she felt like she was walking toward something, not just surviving day to day. The challenge ahead seemed impossible, but then, the impossible was exactly what Richard Harrington wanted her to face. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of notes, melodies, and exhaustion. Lily's life became a careful juggling act, working shifts at Le Ciel, caring for her grandmother, and every spare moment devoted to creating her original piece. Chen Wei proved to be a demanding but invaluable mentor. They met 3 times a week in a small practice room she'd arranged at the Manhattan School of Music. No, Chen Wei said during their 5th session, shaking her head as Lily played through her composition's middle section. "You are playing safe. Too polite. This section needs to breathe fire." Lily stopped, rubbing her tired eyes. "I'm trying to make it technically impressive." "Technical skill is expected," Chen Wei replied. "What will make people stop talking, stop thinking, stop breathing, that comes from here." She placed a hand over her heart. What is this piece about, Lily? What are you trying to say? Lily stared at the scattered notes on the page. I don't know. That's the problem. Chenwei studied her thoughtfully. Your story, the accident, losing parents, giving up your dream.
Have you ever truly grieved?
I didn't have time to grieve, Lily said quietly. I had to take care of Nai, pay bills, survive. Then perhaps that's what your music needs to express. Chenwei closed the piano lid gently. Homework, write down your story, all of it. The day of the accident, what happened after, what you lost. Don't play piano tomorrow, just write. The next day, Lily sat in the community room with a blank notebook. The piano stood silent in the corner as she began to write. The words came slowly at first, then in a rush. The phone call that changed everything. The hospital corridors. The impossible decisions that followed. The dreams packed away like her parents' belongings. When Lily returned to Chenwei 2 days later, something had shifted. She sat at the piano and began to play the composition she'd been working on, but with subtle differences. Rawer emotions, more daring transitions, moments of both anger and tender beauty. Chenwei listened without interruption. When Lily finished, the older woman nodded, satisfaction evident in her eyes. Now you are playing truth, she said simply. Keep this feeling. Refine it, but don't polish away the rough edges. They are important. Richard checked in periodically, sometimes showing up at her practice sessions unannounced. He rarely offered direct feedback, instead asking probing questions that forced Lily to clarify her musical intentions. During one such visit, 2 weeks before the gala, Richard arrived with a folder of papers. The program for the event, he explained, handing it to Lily. Her name was listed among performers that included renowned classical musicians and rising stars from Juilliard. I don't belong in this lineup, Lily said, stomach tightening with anxiety. That's for the audience to decide, Richard replied. He listened to her play through the composition, now taking clearer shape. You're holding back in the final section. It's technically challenging, Lily explained. I'm still working on mastering it. Richard raised an eyebrow. Is that the real reason? Lily's fingers hovered over the keys. No, she admitted after a moment. The ending is personal, vulnerable. It's harder to play in front of people. That's precisely why it needs to be played, Richard said. The parts of ourselves we're most afraid to reveal are usually the most worth sharing. As he prepared to leave, Richard paused at the door. By the way, I've arranged for your grandmother to see Dr. Wang at Columbia Presbyterian. She's a specialist in geriatric rheumatology. Lily stared at him in surprise. But we don't have that kind of insurance. Consider it an advance on our arrangement, Richard cut in. Regardless of how the gala goes, your grandmother will receive the care she needs. Before Lily could respond, he was gone, leaving her wondering once again what game Richard Harrington was really playing. At home that evening, Lily found her grandmother smiling more brightly than she had in months. A car came today, Nai told her. Very nice driver. Took me to see new doctor. She held up a bottle of medication. She gave me these for the pain. Already feeling better. Lily felt a complex mix of gratitude and unease. Richard's generosity came with strings attached, strings she had willingly tied around herself when she accepted his challenge. 1 week before the gala, disaster struck. Lily arrived at Chenwei's hotel for their session to find the older woman pale and coughing. Just a cold, Chenwei insisted, though it clearly wasn't. We continue. But halfway through their practice, Chenwei's cough worsened and she struggled to breathe. Lily called for help, and within an hour, Chenwei was admitted to the hospital with pneumonia. You have all you need now, Chenwei told her from the hospital bed. Trust yourself. Lily left the hospital feeling adrift. For the past 3 weeks, Chenwei had guided her through the creative process, offering wisdom and tough love in equal measure. Now with the gala approaching, she was on her own. That night, Lily couldn't sleep. She paced her tiny apartment, the notes of her composition playing in her head. It was nearly complete, but something about the final section still felt unresolved. At dawn, she made a decision. She called in sick to the restaurant and headed to the practice room at the Manhattan School of Music. For the next 12 hours, she worked without breaks, reworking the ending of her piece again and again. As the practice room grew dark, she finally played the composition from beginning to end. The piece had transformed. It began with hesitant notes reflecting her childhood. moved through the turbulence of loss and built toward a resolution that was neither wholly sad nor entirely triumphant, but honestly human. When she finally left the practice room, she found Richard waiting in the hallway. "How long have you been there?" she asked, startled. "Long enough." He stood, his expression thoughtful. "You've found it, haven't you?" Lily nodded, too tired for words. "Good." Richard checked his watch. 3 days left. Get some rest. Tomorrow we need to talk about what you'll wear. The night before the gala, Lily visited Chen Wei in the hospital. The older woman was looking better, though still too ill to attend the performance. "Play for me," Chen Wei requested. "One last time before tomorrow." "I can't bring a piano in here," Lily smiled. Chen Wei pointed to the bedside table. "Bring that." It was a small electronic keyboard, just 2 octaves of tiny keys. "Richard brought it," Chen Wei explained. "So I could still teach from bed." "Ridiculous, man." Lily placed the keyboard on her lap and played a simplified version of her piece. Even on the tiny instrument, the emotional core of the composition came through. When she finished, Chen Wei had tears in her eyes. "Perfect," she whispered. "Now tell me what you named it." Lily had been avoiding this final step. Naming the piece made it real, completed, ready to share with the world. "The Rising," she said finally. "I'm calling it The Rising." Chen Wei nodded approvingly. "Yes, that fits." The day of the gala arrived with crystal clear skies and a crispness in the air that hinted at the approaching autumn. Lily stood in front of her bathroom mirror, hardly recognizing herself. The dress Richard had sent over was elegant without being flashy, a deep blue gown that flowed like water when she moved. Her grandmother watched from the doorway, eyes bright with pride. "You look like your mother," she said softly. She would be so proud today. A car arrived precisely at 6, whisking them to Lincoln Center. The Metropolitan Opera House was illuminated against the darkening sky, people in formal attire streaming through its doors. Backstage was controlled chaos. Performers warmed up, stage managers rushed about with clipboards, and techs made final adjustments to the lighting. Lily was directed to a small practice room where a piano waited. She warmed up methodically, playing through difficult passages of her piece. Her hands felt steady, her mind clear. Whatever happened tonight, she would play her truth. A soft knock interrupted her practice. Richard entered, impeccably dressed in a tuxedo. "Nervous?" he asked, studying her face. "Terrified," Lily admitted. "But ready, I think." "Good." Richard handed her a small box. Inside was a simple jade pendant on a silver chain. "It belonged to my mother," he said. "She was a concert pianist before she married my father. She wore it for good luck." Lily looked up in surprise. In all their interactions, Richard had never shared anything personal. "Why are you giving me this?" "Because I think you'll need it less than the others," he replied with a small smile. "But tradition is tradition." As he helped her fasten the necklace, Richard spoke quietly. "There will be over 500 people in that audience tonight. Critics, musicians, wealthy patrons. They've come expecting to be impressed. Your job is not to impress them." "What is my job?" Lily asked. "To make them feel something real." Richard stepped back. "You're on in 20 minutes. 4th performer." After he left, Lily closed her eyes, centering herself. She thought of her parents, of the dreams deferred, of her grandmother's sacrifices, of Chen Wei's wisdom. She thought of Richard Harrington, who had seen something in her worth challenging. When the stage manager called her name, Lily walked toward the stage with steady steps. Through the curtain, she could hear the murmur of hundreds of voices, the rustle of programs, the subtle sounds of a distracted audience. As she stepped into the light, Lily saw the vast hall spread before her, faces turned toward the stage with polite expectation. She took her seat at the gleaming concert grand piano, adjusted the bench, and placed her fingers on the keys. For a moment, she was just a waitress again, out of place in this world of wealth and accomplishment. Then she took a deep breath, felt the jade pendant against her skin, and began to play. The first notes of The Rising filled the great hall, and Lily forgot about everything else. The first notes of The Rising floated across the grand hall, gentle and questioning. Lily's fingers moved with careful precision, building the opening theme that represented her childhood. Simple, innocent, full of possibility. A hush began to settle over the front rows as listeners leaned forward slightly, drawn in by the unexpected intimacy of the piece. In the third row, Richard sat perfectly still, his expression unreadable. Beside him, Lily's grandmother dabbed at her eyes, recognizing the Chinese folk melody woven into the introduction, the same lullaby she had sung to Lily as a child. As the piece progressed, Lily entered the section that portrayed the accident and its aftermath. Dissonant chords crashed against each other, the melody fragmenting into chaotic patterns before dissolving into a haunting, minor key passage that spoke of loss and grief. From the corner of her eye, Lily noticed something remarkable happening. The subtle background noise of the audience, the whispers, program rustling, coughing, had completely disappeared. Every face was turned toward her, every body still. She moved into the middle section, where the tempo slowed and the melody became a dialogue between her right and left hands, one voice questioning, the other answering, neither finding resolution. This was her musical representation of the years after losing her parents, the constant internal struggle between duty and dream. A sudden, unexpected modulation shifted the piece into a brighter key, introducing hope amid the melancholy. Lily's fingers danced across the keys with growing confidence as the composition built toward its climax. In this moment, she forgot about the challenge, about Richard, about the 500 strangers watching her. She played for herself, for her parents, for her grandmother, for the dream she had reluctantly set aside. Each note was a heartbeat, each phrase a breath, each crescendo a step forward on a journey back to herself. When she reached the final section, the part she had reworked countless times, Lily closed her eyes. This was the most personal part of the piece, the most vulnerable. It began softly, almost tentatively, with a simple theme representing her return to music. Gradually, it incorporated elements from throughout the piece, transforming them, healing them until they blossomed into something new. The final moments of The Rising built to a powerful, emotional conclusion, not with technical pyrotechnics, but with a profound simplicity that resonated throughout the hall. The last chord hung in the air like a question finally answered. Then, silence. Complete. Absolute silence. Lily opened her eyes. 500 people sat motionless, many with tears streaming down their faces. For several heartbeats, no one moved, no one spoke. No one even seemed to breathe. Then, from somewhere in the back, someone stood. Then another. Within seconds, the entire audience was on their feet, applause thundering through the hall. Lily rose from the piano bench, overwhelmed by the response. Through tear-blurred vision, she found Richard in the crowd. He remained seated, but his usual mask of cool assessment had fallen away. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked genuinely moved. Backstage, Lily was greeted by fellow performers and music directors offering congratulations, and in some cases, contact information. One woman introduced herself as the Dean of Admissions at the Manhattan School of Music. "We should talk about your fall enrollment," she said, pressing a card into Lily's hand. "Richard has explained your situation, but after tonight's performance, I believe we can arrange a substantial scholarship." Before Lily could fully process this, her grandmother appeared, supported by a nurse Richard had arranged to help her navigate the event. Nina embraced her, whispering words of pride in Mandarin. "Your parents hear you tonight," she said. "From heaven they hear." After the final performer, Richard hosted a reception in one of the opera house's elegant function rooms. Lily found herself surrounded by people eager to discuss her composition and her background. Critics, music directors, potential mentors, the very people who might have intimidated her a month ago, now treated her as a peer. Near midnight, as the crowd began to thin, Richard finally approached her. "Congratulations," he said simply, offering a glass of champagne. "You did what I asked. You silenced the room." "Thank you for the opportunity," Lily replied, "and for helping my grandmother. I don't understand why you did all this, but I'm grateful." Richard led her to a quieter corner of the room. "I told you about my mother being a pianist," he said, his voice lower than usual. "What I didn't mention is that she gave it up because my father thought it was an impractical occupation. She spent the rest of her life regretting that choice." He looked out over the thinning crowd. "When I saw your hands that first night at Luciel, calloused from years of training but serving plates instead of playing, I saw my mother's hands." Lily was silent, seeing Richard in a new light. "The foundation I'm establishing," he continued, will help talented musicians who face financial or personal obstacles. Your story and your talent will help convince potential donors that it's worthwhile. So I was a test case? Lily asked. Initially, Richard admitted. But you became something else along the way. You became proof that I was right, that talent and passion shouldn't be wasted because of circumstance. He handed her an envelope. As agreed, full scholarship to the school of your choice and comprehensive medical care for your grandmother. Lily took the envelope, emotions swirling. I don't know what to say. Say you'll continue playing, Richard replied. That's payment enough. Before she could respond, Richard's assistant approached with an urgent message. With a brief nod to Lily, Richard moved away to handle whatever business matter couldn't wait. The next morning, Lily woke to find her story featured in the art section of several major newspapers. Critics praised The Rising as raw but sophisticated, emotionally authentic, and a stunning debut from an important new voice. Her phone rang constantly, journalists seeking interviews, music directors offering opportunities, even a recording company interested in her composition. By noon, she felt overwhelmed by the sudden attention. Seeking quiet, she made her way to the hospital to visit Chen Wei. She found the older woman sitting up in bed, newspaper spread across her lap. So, Chen Wei said with a broad smile, not just the room you silenced, but the whole city talks about you today. Lily laughed, the tension of the past weeks finally releasing. I wish you could have been there. I was there in spirit, Chen Wei replied. And I will be there for your next performance and the one after that. She patted the bed, indicating Lily should sit. Now we must plan your future. I have ideas. They spent the afternoon discussing possibilities, further study, potential teachers, repertoire to develop. Chen Wei's experience provided a roadmap through the suddenly open world of professional music. As evening approached, a nurse brought in a small arrangement of white orchids. The card read simply, the first of many performances. R.H. 2 days later, Lily returned to Luciel for the last time. She wasn't there to serve meals, but to collect her final paycheck and say goodbye to coworkers. May hugged her tightly. I always knew you were meant for something else, May said. Just didn't know it would happen so fast. The manager, who had once threatened her job over spilled water, now treated her with almost comical deference, mentioning that they might name a dish after her. As Lily prepared to leave, she paused by the piano in the lounge. It seemed smaller somehow, less intimidating than it had that first night. She sat down and played a few notes, the beginning of The Rising. Sounds better on a Steinway, came a familiar voice. Richard stood nearby, apparently having just finished dinner with business associates. Everything sounds better on a Steinway, Lily agreed with a smile. How's your grandmother? Much better. The new treatment is already helping. Thank you, Richard nodded. And the scholarship offers? I've decided on Juilliard, Lily said. I start this winter. Good choice. Richard glanced at his watch. I have a proposition for you. Lily raised an eyebrow. Another challenge? Of sorts. I'm hosting a benefit next month for the foundation. We need a signature piece to open the event. Let me guess, you want me to play? Richard smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. No, I want you to compose something new. Something that tells not just your story, but the story of all the talented people who need a second chance. Lily considered this. A month ago, the request would have terrified her. Now it felt like exactly the right next step. I'd be honored, she said. As Richard turned to leave, he paused. By the way, what made you choose the name The Rising? Lily looked around the restaurant where her journey had begun with spilled water and an impossible demand. Because that's what happens after you fall, she said simply. If you're brave enough, you rise again. Outside Luciel, dusk was settling over Manhattan. Lily stepped onto the sidewalk, the city stretching before her like a keyboard full of possibilities. Somewhere in that urban symphony was her new apartment, closer to Juilliard, with a real piano and space for her grandmother. The jade pendant Richard had lent her for good luck now hung permanently around her neck, his gift after her performance. She touched it lightly, feeling its smooth surface against her fingertips. Tonight she would begin sketching ideas for her new composition. Tomorrow she had her first official meeting with the dean at Juilliard. The day after, Chen Wei would be released from the hospital and had already scheduled their first post-gala lesson. The path ahead would have challenges, certainly. But after silencing a room of 500 with nothing but her truth set to music, Lily knew she could face whatever came next. She hailed a taxi, ready to go home, and begin again.